G'day everyone, welcome to another KFC SuperCoach AFL video on our YouTube page. Hope you're enjoying the great content we're putting up here. We'll hopefully do a lot more of this sort of stuff through the preseason and then as the year goes on, but I'll have to get on to my colleagues like the Phantom and Tim and get them to do one of these team reveal videos where I'm going to go through my team as it looks right now on the 1st of February. So obviously a bit of water to go under the bridge. We can see the ticker up in the corner of the screen there, 43 days until round one. But this is how things are looking right now in my team, Don't Argue, which has had that name for a while. So we'll be sticking with that again, and hopefully the great man Dusty can come back and have a good year. Not brave enough to pick him in Supercoach, but it does strike me that he's kind of flying way under the radar in terms of AFL predictions for this year. We don't know what he's going to do, obviously, after had a pretty rough year last year with injuries and a whole lot of things going on for him off the field, but he could make a pretty big impact when he comes straight back into the Tigers team for round one. So looking forward to that. But as I say, not brave enough to pick him in KFC SuperCoach. But we start with a blank screen, which is always fun at this time of year. $10 million in the bank to spend. So all the possibilities in the world. So let's see where we go with this, starting at the back line as we like to do. And the instant question that we have to face is that there are 6 or 5 players this year, I should say, priced over $600,000 in the back line, which is extremely unusual. Sometimes we don't get any or maybe one, and that's really sort of midfield pricing there. So, how many of these guys can we actually start? And I think one of the good things about KFC SuperCoach this year is that there are lots of possibilities, and I've seen different teams doing this completely different ways, picking 3, maybe even a 4th top line defender. Or some teams going with 1 or maybe even none and trying to find heaps of value here and then spending up in other parts of the ground. So there's lots of different ways we can do it this year, but I suppose I've gone with a little bit of a cookie cutter to start with in this sense, and just the instinct is, well, I want to have a couple of these really high-end guys. Now, my team has been online for about a week or so since the game opened, and since then there've been a couple of little changes, so little YouTube exclusive here. And the first one is with the very first player picked, and I've got James Sicily back in my team. He was certainly a mainstay last year, just such a fantastic pick. Got him for about $450,000 at the start of the year. Went on to be the number 2 averaging defender for the season, averaging 113 points a game. There's always a bit of a reluctance to pay up, 150 grand more for somebody the next year, given obviously he's nowhere near the same value. But I just think of these top line defenders, I think the Phantom had a really good article ranking them that's still online to go and read. Comparing all of these guys, and he's the one who there's the least question marks over. They'll probably all be great, but just with Hawthorn really rebuilding, it's hard to see his role changing at all. And we know how good it is. He doesn't rely on kick-ins or any one source of scoring. Takes intercept marks. He's has high disposal numbers. His efficiency is really good. So as long as he can, stay out of the umpire's bad books. I think he gave away 1 or 2 50-metre penalties in the end last year, but not too many. But that's really the only thing that can hold him back. And I did do some numbers on his scoring in wins versus losses last year, and he averaged about 105 points a game in Hawthorn wins and 118 or so in Hawthorn losses. And they won 7 or 8 games last year. They've traded out a lot of their experienced players, Mitchell, Amira, Gunston are all gone. So hard to see them winning more games this year than they did last year. So plenty of opportunities for James Sicily to score plenty of points for us in the back line. So he's locked in at D1 at the moment. And then if I'm going to pick one more of these expensive players, Jordan Dawson was someone I had for a while. He's gone out for Sicily. You got to find reasons not to pick these guys. He'll probably be fantastic. And I can see a lot of good reasons to pick him. He's just a little bit unsure, where does he actually play? Is he a halfback? Is he a wing? Do they try him up in the forward line a little bit or in the midfield, which they did at times last year? So you're just not 100% sure where he's going to line up any given week. But, we know he's such a great player, good user of the ball. The Crows always want to get it to him. So he's definitely high in my consideration. And Sam Doherty has to be in the mix as well after a fantastic year last year, averaging 109. Every time he's played a full season, he's averaged at least, 105, 110. So you really can't go wrong there. And there's suggestions that he could play in the midfield a bit more, at least early in the year with Sam Walsh out injured. And he played in the middle in the last 2 rounds last year and scored 120, 130 in both those games. So, there's potential for him to score really well also. But for my D2 at this stage, I'm going with Tom Stewart at the Cats. His scoring last year was insane. Pretty much when I didn't have him, I did bring him in towards the back end of the year and he didn't score as well. But 3 scores over 160 last year, which is absolutely nuts for a defender. And there's possibly a tiny bit of value in his price just because he had that one game where he was subbed out at quarter time where he was knocked out by Bailey Smith and he still scored 40 odd points, but obviously that sort of means his average is a little bit under what it would have been if you take that game out. So it affects his price slightly. So you might get a few grand discount there. And also the fact that Geelong bye is quite helpful. I'm not worrying too much about the buys at this stage of the year, but it is worth noting that the one round of the buys where only 2 teams are off is Geelong and Gold Coast, and there's best 18 scoring all the way through. So that means that if in that round, you won't have Tom Stewart available, he'll put him on the bench, but we'll have everybody else. We should be able to make best 18 easily anyway. And then Stewart will play through all the other bye rounds. So that could be a real bonus when that time of year comes around. So it's just when you're trying to find those tiny little things to set these players apart, who do you choose between, a Doherty and a Stewart or a Stewart and a Dawson? And that's why I'm leaning with Tom Stewart at this stage. And then for my D3, we scroll down a little bit. So I've got 2 of those top end guys, and then another player who I think can join them this year, and that is Nick Dacos. So, we all saw what he did last year. Absolutely incredible debut season, averaged 92 in his first year, which is almost unheard of. And that was around 80 in the first half of the year, which is still fantastic. And then he averaged over 100 in the run home after Collingwood's bye. So hopefully he can do that more regularly this year. At match simulation, I think it's good news that he's still playing mainly training with the defenders, because I think easier for him to score points there. He can get kick-ins. Phantom had another good stat that Dacos had 52 kick-ins last year and played on from every single one of them. So that's what we love. And, we know he's such a good user of the ball that they try and get the ball in his hands coming out of defence. And I think we will see him push more up the field. He'll get some more centre bounces and maybe on a wing. And, they'd love to use his kicking going inside 50 as well because it's so good. But hopefully mainly in the D50 where he can rack up maybe a few more cheapy possessions and help boost his score that way. I do just want to caution that, it is unusual for a player to jump in their second season to a true premium. It's only happened, 3 or 4 times that I can remember in my whole time playing KFC SuperCoach. And those are guys like Bontempelli did it, Clayton Oliver did it. So it's I think Sam Walsh as well. So it's the real elite players. So is Dacos in that category? I think he can be, but it wouldn't be a huge shock at all if he averages in the 90s again this year, which would still be a good result for if you're a Collingwood fan, and his progression and everything would be totally okay with that. But for SuperCoach, we really need him to try and jump up a little bit, add another 10 points at least to his average. So I think he can, but it's not a total lock at this stage. But I'm happy to pick him there at D3 in February, as we say. Now, D4, I'm really looking for some value here. And, it's like, how do we structure our defence? You could run all rookies from here, and the defensive rookies look pretty strong this year, which is great, because remember last year, this time we had, I think, Sam DeConing here and then nobody else. So this year there's quite a few names that we could consider. So, that's a possible way you could do it and save some money. But I'm going to throw in one mid-price, and that is Elliot Yeo at West Coast. Huge injury risk. He's hardly played, the last 2 or 3 seasons, he's managed sort of 5 or 6 games. Has lots of injuries, so that's always a huge red flag. But so far in pre-season, we're here that he's flying on the track. He's playing a mix of defence and midfield, which is great. Another good sign there that there's plenty of opportunities for him to score. And if you go back to his best years, 2018 and 19, it might be, it's going back a few years. He averaged 109 2 years in a row. So it wasn't just one totally out of the blue. I know my colleague Tim Mitchell was considering Nick Haynes as another sort of mid-price year. And he did have one really good premium year, but that was really just 1 year out of a 10-year career. Whereas we know Yo's done it. I think he's averaged over 103 times and had those 2 really good seasons. So if his body can hold together, he could be a really good value pick there. And the good thing about these guys is, he doesn't have to play 22 games. I obviously love that, but if he can get through 10 games, he'll make a heap of money, and then you could trade him potentially up to a premium. So that's what I'm hoping from Elliot Yeo. And the Eagles, just, I guess, can't be as bad as last year is what we're hoping. Now we get down into the rookie price territory, and it's like, which rookies could we be confident actually starting on the field each week? And this guy is definitely one of those. Connor McKenna should be one of the top picks in KFC SuperCoach this year. I was in the Herald Sun office yesterday, and Robbo walked past and he said, "Al, I've got the lock of the year, the lock of the century for you in KFC SuperCoach," and that is Connor McKenna. And so that's good news. Robbo knows what's going on. He talks to people at footy clubs, and he reckons Connor McKenna's going to play. So that was the only slight question mark. Where does he fit in to that Brisbane team? Obviously, they're a pretty good side, hard to break into, but you think they signed him for a reason. Conor McKenna had a choice of going for Brisbane, I think Geelong, and maybe a couple of other clubs were interested in his services, and he chose the Lions. So you wouldn't think he'd do that if he's just going to play in the NEAFL. Coming back from Ireland after a couple of years out, he averaged sort of in the 70s when he played at the Bombers in that defensive role. There's also been a little bit of speculation, would he potentially play half forward at Brisbane? But I think he slots in beautifully at halfback. That's kind of what they needed. There was, there's not many missing pieces in the Lions team, but a bit of dash of halfback, a bit of flair and pace is probably one thing they could have added to the mix. So he gives them that. So I'm really happy having him there, and I think he can score in that 60, 70 range at least, and that will, give us some really good cash injection, from that 167 starting price, and some decent points on field each week, which of course are very important. Now, the rest are pretty much placeholders for this time of the year. At the moment, at D6, I've got Campbell Chesser, another Eagle. I was going to pick him last year, and then just on the eve of the season, he hurt his foot and didn't play at all. And he was around the 150k mark last year, so now he comes back at 123. We will have to keep a close eye on how he's tracking in the preseason. He's just rejoined the main group, so hopefully he's up and ready for round one, but he may not be. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. And there are other options in that price range that we could pick there if he doesn't get up. But I like what he brings. Another speedy sort of defender who the Eagles can throw in straight away. You think they're going to play plenty of kids. Another one that I know my rookie guru colleagues, especially Dan Batten, loves Ruben Ginby for the Eagles in this sort of position as well. You can pick him in the midfield. He's another depth mid, high draft pick who I think will play early. He's 171k though, so you need a little bit more money to afford him, but he's definitely one that will be on the preseason radar. Hopefully watching some of those preseason matches, not that there's too many of them this year. And then on the bench, now slightly risky in the sense that I'm using, the absolute bottom price guys here, which if they don't get up for round one, you've got to find some money to replace them with someone probably a little bit more expensive. But at the moment, we can throw in Charlie Dean for Collingwood. Again, someone who I had there last year, had to get rid of when he got injured just before the year started, a mature age defender. They picked him from the VFL, and we thought he was going to play straight away, and then obviously didn't because of his injuries, but he's back and training fully again now. So again, Collingwood probably went a bit better than we thought they would last year. So we'll see how he slots in, but tall defender is probably something they could use. So hopefully he gets a game. And then the other one that I've got here at the moment is an Essendon draft pick, Rhett Montgomery, who again is 102,000. So Dean actually is 123. He's gone up last year. He was 102, but he gets a bit of a price bump even though he didn't play, unfortunately. But Rhett is at bottom price, and he's one of these classic sandful intercept defenders that teams love to pick up in the preseason draft or in the rookie draft. And you think of the likes of Callum Sinclair from the Saints, and they got Tom Highmore as well. Very much in that ilk. Really good intercept numbers in the SANFL last year. Mature age, I think he's 22 or 23, so can come in and play straight away. So I don't know if he's in their best 22, but I like the read up of him from the draft. So hopefully he gets a crack early in the year. But as I say, there's other players in the mix here, and these are just guys to fill that spot at the moment when we're looking at that team structure. So from the defence, we move into the midfield, and this is where obviously the big bucks are spent and where we can hopefully get a lot of points for our KFC SuperCoach teams each week. And the first question has to be, do you pick Rory Laird? Highest player in the game, 703, highest priced player at 703,000. And that instantly makes me think, maybe I'll just scroll down to the next guy. And I think that's what nearly everybody is doing. His ownership numbers are really low for this stage of the year, only about in 10% of teams, which seems way too low. That makes me think, maybe I will go back and put him in, because Rory Laird was just so consistent last year. He almost never drops a bad game, so he doesn't come down in price. Like the way the SuperCoach pricing works, after sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds, the prices tend to sort of even out, where the rookies start coming up and some of those guys at the top start coming down a bit. Even though he might average 125, he might drop to 670,000 or something like that. But he's probably never going to get much cheaper than that. So whenever we, I don't think it's a great plan to think, I'll just pick him up later on when he's cheap, because that's probably never going to happen. And it'll always be a tricky move to try and get him in. It's very hard to get a player that expensive with 1 or 2 trades. So maybe if we want to get him, the best move is to just get him now and accept the fact that he might drop in price a tiny bit, but you can just bank those scores. You've already got him. You never have to worry about trading him in, and you can make him captain every week, and he's a player potentially that most other teams don't have. So there's a lot going for the Rory-led selection, and I'm definitely open to putting him in. But at the moment, my M1 is Clayton Oliver, and all the same arguments really apply. I guess the only thing that puts him ahead is about $4,000 cheaper, and just that he's done it now 3 years in a row, averaged over 120, whereas Rory's only been up there for the last year or two. So I mean, splitting hairs really, but very confident that Clayton can have another really strong year, and I think Melbourne has a pretty good draw early on as well. So hopefully, he can get out of the blocks early. And again, if you don't start with him, it's going to be a struggle to try and get him in. And next to him at M2, I've got Tuke Miller, who is the fourth most expensive midfielder, had the most games over 150 of any player last year. So we know how he can score. Started the year a little bit slowly, but probably the one thing just tipping things slightly in his favour is that bye that I mentioned earlier that they share with the Cats. So he'll miss that week, but we should be able to cover him pretty easily, and then he'll be there through all the rest of the buy. So that'll be a big help when they come around. So another big scorer there, but plenty of good options you could consider. And M3, I'm throwing in Marcus Bontempelli, who I picked up last year. I actually got him a few rounds before he became DPP, but then everyone jumped on. But I was frustrated with him at times. I thought, what is Bevo doing? He's playing him in full forward, not throwing him in the mids where we know he's so great, and his scoring was a bit annoying. But then I look back over his scores. His lowest score for the year was 88. I think he only scored under 100 3 times, and the other two were like 97 and 98. And then he averages 116. So, and that's in a year which was a little bit frustrating at times. And you think this year they hopefully don't need him at forward as much. Now they've got Rory Lobb down there and some of these other guys coming through, like a Hugo Hagen. And the fact that Josh Dunkley's gone, there's midfield time there that needs to go to somebody. So the Bont has to be the number one candidate. And you think even if he has just another average year by Bont standards, he averages 115, and we know what he could do. He could be the number one scoring player in the whole game if it all clicks for him. So I love the Bont, and you could make a really good argument for starting Jack McRae as well. And I'm seeing a few teams with both of those Bulldogs in there. He's priced just under Bontempelli at 634K, so he's the seventh most expensive bid, but that's actually potentially a bit of a bargain for McRae given his scoring history. He was sort of in the Oliver camp of averaging over 120 3 or 4 years in a row, and then last year dropped to 115. So if he gets back in the midfield, as I say, with that Dunkley time available, he could get straight back up to his old ways and score 120 plus again. So he's definitely been in my teams at various stages of the year. Unfortunately, you can't pick all these guys, but he's definitely one that's right in consideration. And the other one that I have thrown around as an option, I'll check him in just to see what it looks like, but I probably won't keep him there at the moment. But it's Christian Petrarca, just looking for a bit of a point of difference, someone that nobody's picking. He's in about 6 or 7% of teams at the moment, but who could explode. Now, he's averaged 112 last year, and it was very similar the year before. So again, he has an average year, averages 110, 115. So, I can't see a world where this is a bad pick unless he gets injured or something like that we can't predict. The only issue is that he does tend to, at some stage during the year, usually drop a game or two where he scores 70 or 80 and you can get him a bit cheaper. But what I'm thinking this year is, what would be fantastic is if you could find the 2 or 3 players who are going to explode out of the blocks, like Patrick Cripps did last year, like Tom Green did last year. I missed the boat on both of those. And even though neither of them in the end finished as top 8 scoring midfielders, you really needed them in those early rounds to get ahead. And then once you're, in that top, you're off and running and you're in the top 1,000 or so, rankings, you can build your team from there rather than just playing catch up for the whole season, which is what I was doing. So Petrarca is someone who could do that. If the cards all fall for him, he could average 140 for the first 6 rounds or something. And the Melbourne draw is really good. I think the first 3 are a bit tricky, but then after that, they play all the teams that you think he could score well against. West Coast, North Melbourne, Essendon, Hawthorn, Gold Coast are all in that stretch. So, and even Richmond, which obviously I'm hoping the Tigers will have a good year, but they don't tag, and opposition midfielders tend to score really well against us. So, that's definitely one that I'm considering. It's just, would you put him in instead of Oliver, or whose spot does he take? That's where obviously things get a bit tricky. But this spot at M4, there is a bit of a rotating, revolving door a little bit at the moment, because the other thing here to consider is that there are a lot of good, scrolling past Patrick Cripps, he could have a really good start again. That no Sam Walsh, so he's being overlooked by a lot of people. But I'm scrolling down to the next little bracket of 500 to 550k mids, and there are some really good names in here. Luke Davies-Uniacke, average 110 in the second half of last year. Expect him to carry on like that. Tom Green, I already mentioned, we know how he started the year, what he's capable of. No Taranto, no Hopper in the GWS midfield anymore, so plenty of opportunities for him. Tom Mitchell is cheap compared to what we know he can do. He's around this price as well. But the one I've got at the moment is, sticking to this Gold Coast theme of I'm going to maybe suffer in that one bye round, but hopefully dominate in all the others. And that is Noah Anderson. And yeah, very much, up for grabs this spot in my team. But I like him at the moment as, just trying to back in a player who you think can really break out. And Anderson followed basically very similar trajectory to Luke Davies-Uniacke last year, and then he averaged around sort of 95 to 100 in the first half of the year, and then exploded after the bye, averaging over 110 for the run home. It was about 114 for the last 8 games. So, that's his scoring potential. If he could do that for a whole year, he'd be a super pick. That'd make him a top 8 midfielder. There's a lot of players trying to get into that conversation, so not as easy as it sounds, but he's definitely capable of it, and just super skilled player. We think the Suns are going to improve, and he sort of gets overlooked a bit by fans, I think, but also by maybe opposition coaches. You might tag Took, but I can't see Noah Anderson getting a tag. So he's one I really like this year. We will see whether he can hold his spot in my team. And now, who's in next at M6? This guy, I'm certain he's going to start in round 1 for my SuperCoach team, and that is Jacob Hopper. Richmond bringing him over, and they got Taranto as well. We'll get to him soon. But I think he'll be a lock in a lot of teams just at that price. He's priced at averaging 67, which is what he did last year. Only played 7 games, so a lot of injuries. He got injured in round 1, came back in, I think, round 18 when the Giants season was done, and the coach was maybe experimenting with a few things, and he just couldn't get back into it at all. But in previous years, he's averaged in the 90s, high 90s a couple of times. And, I would expect he'll just go straight back to that at Richmond, and potentially even better. Richmond's game style doesn't tend to, have midfielders averaging 110, but he'll be the centre bounce mid. Probably Dion Presti is still number 1, but we know how his injury history is, and Hopper will just slot straight in next to him with all the centre bounces in the world at Richmond. So really happy with him. Potentially could become a keeper if he can average 100 plus, be sort of happy having him at M8 for the rest of the year. But if that doesn't quite work out and he averages 95, he'll still make us a heap of money. Richmond has the final buy. You're carrying him through to there and then trading him out. So really happy selecting him, and good to have some Tigers in my team that I can barrack for. Now, down to the rookies, and we're going with Will Ashcroft, who was the number 2 draft pick, but many thought could be the number 1 father-son, obviously, to the Brisbane Lions. And junior numbers just absolutely nuts. Averaged sort of about 150 when he was playing in the under-18s, and then he played 3 games, senior games in the VFL for Brisbane last year, and scored 120, 130 in all of those as well. Chris Fagan said last year he could have played for Brisbane seniors, in the AFL if he had been eligible last year. And I've seen some notes from their training this year that he's definitely part of the midfield mix there with Lachie Neale and Dunkley and these guys. So there are a couple of little question marks about paying that much for a rookie, and how much. It's not like he's coming into a bottom team like when Sam Walsh was drafted to Carlton, and what normally happens, obviously, because the bottom teams have the top picks. But you're coming into a team that's right in premiership contention. But his junior numbers and everything you read about him is that he's an absolute gun. So I think I'm pretty confident that he'll be a good pick. And next to him, we've got Will Phillips at the Kangaroos, who was pick 2 or 3 years ago. It just has not had a run at it at all. Last year he had COVID and then 2 bouts of glandular fever. So no luck whatsoever. But the reports from Kangaroos preseason training are really good, that he's really starring at some of their match simulation this year in the midfield. So, we know North has a lot of rebuilding to do, and Clarko has a lot of midfielders that he can run through there. But at 158,000, that should be great value for Will Phillips. Can average 70 or 80. Again, be a safe on-field pick for us, at least in the early part of the year, make some cash. So happy to pick him at this stage. And then, sort of it's 4 rookies to fill out the team, and these are again pretty much placeholders, but we'll have a guess at who might end up here. And Josh Sin is one who has another year in the system compared to some of the guys coming in straight out of the draft. We do have the sub rule back this year, or it's been changed, so we don't have to. Clubs don't have to have an injured player to sub someone off, so there is a little concern there with especially some of the first-year players. Teenagers might get tired at three-quarter time and get subbed off, or even worse, start as the sub and just come on and play a quarter. not a whole lot we can do to plan for that, unfortunately. But I think players who've been in the system for a little bit longer have the more mature bodies. Maybe they're a little bit safer and will avoid the sub vest. And Josh Sin obviously was a high draft pick 12, 15 months ago. Only played the one game last year, and now this year he's got forward mid eligibility as well, which is handy. And there is suggestions that he's at least in the conversation to take the wing role that has vacated their Port with Carl Amon going over to Hawthorn. So we'll see how he goes in the preseason, but that'd be a really good result if we can get him in there as a starter. On the bench, we just go for a few cheapies. Connor Blakely is 123,000. Now he's a senior Fremantle player who Gold Coast picked up. I don't really know why. I'm not sure how he fits into their team. I guess he's probably a bit of insurance if anyone gets injured, but he's really cheap and he's a mature body, so throw him in there for now and see how he goes. Oscar Baker is another sort of mature age, interesting name at bottom price, 123,000. Now at the Bulldogs, he was delisted by Melbourne, but apparently he's been going really well in match simulation there for the Dogs in the preseason. Might play on a wing, so I mean Bevo, who knows? But we'll chuck him in there for now. And then Dan Batten's man, Joe Richards gets a Guernsey here as well. Mid forward helps. One of the best stories, probably the best story in the draft. Killed it for Wangaratta, I think it was, up in the country leagues. And Collingwood got him in, and another mature ager who is, his body should definitely hold up if he can win a spot in the Collingwood team, which, not always that easy to do, but we'll back him in for now. We like Joe Richards. Now, into the rucks. This is really hard because, normally this year I'd probably almost start my team in the rucks normally because you spend so much money there and it dictates what you do everywhere else. But this year, the one positive is we're probably not going to spend as much in the ruck, which leaves a bit of money for other positions because you just can't have confidence really in a lot of these top end guys. Now, Gawn's got a bit of a hamstring niggle and he's 622,000, and Brody Grundy's coming in. I love Max Gawn, but I don't think we can pick him. Jared Witts, I've seen in some teams, and that's totally fine. I mean, he's going to be the number one ruck for Gold Coast every single week. I do have quite a few Gold Coast players already. Maybe I could have another one. But just think 605K is a lot to pay. He started the year unbelievably and tailed off a little bit towards the end last year. So maybe 109 is a little bit overs for where he's priced at. I could definitely see him averaging 100 again, but probably a little bit reluctant to pay that. The other one that I'm seriously considering here is Rowan Marshall, who is a little bit cheaper. 506,000, and you got Grundy there at 512. So, getting Grundy for 512 any year in the past, 5 or 6 years, if you saw that, you just put him in absolutely straight away. He's priced at about 92, averaged 103 last year, even with his injuries. Just can't see him scoring less than 100 really, and you probably get more of the ruck. Gawn maybe floating forward or back, but it's just so hard to know. So we'll keep an eye on him. Maybe he's a round 3 trade in if he dominates the first 2 rounds. Rowan Marshall's another one definitely in consideration. Bit cheaper, 506,000. And with him, we were just waiting for Paddy Ryder to retire because we know how well he can score. He was 110, 120 averaging ruckman. The only worry is, what's Ross Lyon going to do? He's new coach, and in the final round last year, they played Tom Campbell as basically the number one ruck and Rowan Marshall, as a support around the ground. And then now, of course, they've got Max King injured. So will they need Rowan Marshall to play as a forward, even for the first month of the year until King comes back? So again, question marks, but I could definitely see myself picking him. If he's clear number one ruck in the preseason for the Saints, and it seems that's what Ross is doing, I'm definitely very, very tempted by that. But at the moment, I've got Tim English. It was a frustrating player to own last year, and I missed some of those really early scores. I guess that shows that he can, go on a tear and average 130, which he did. So that's obviously what we're hoping for again. And the similar argument here in terms of, being the number one ruckman. Steph Martin has retired at the Bulldogs, even though, he didn't play heaps last year. He played half a dozen games and gave English a chop out, which we didn't like. So no, he's not there anymore. They brought in Rory Lobb, who will play mostly forward, doesn't like really rucking, at centre bounces. So I don't think they'll use him like that, but he'll give English a little bit of a rest when the ball's down in the forward line. But that means they shouldn't play another ruck. I can't see Jordan Sweet playing in the same team with English and Lobb. So that means English should get more ruck time, and he can just be up on the ball, which is what he's so good at. He doesn't win a heap of points from hit-outs, but he's just around the ground, a great link-up player for the Dogs. So probably the only other slight concern with him is his concussion history and a bit of injury history. And we just heard yesterday that he's got a bit of a tight adductor and he's going to have a week off training, but very early days. So not going to hit the panic button yet, but do that is one thing to keep an eye on with his body has been a little bit iffy in the past, and especially with those concussions. If he gets another one, given that he's had a few, they might take a pretty cautious route with the dog. So good reasons to pick him. He can score really well. Unfortunately, he's not ruck forward this year, but he's in at the moment. But we'll see how he goes over the preseason. Now, R2 a lot easier to pick, just because of all the uncertainty. I think it's pretty obvious choice in a way to throw in Darcy Cameron here. I think potentially he could end up there. He could average over 100. He averaged 105 or 103 or something when he was the solo ruck for Collingwood, but that price factors in the first 6 rounds when he was playing alongside Brodie Grundy and averaged about 40. So lots and lots of value in the price, and the best thing is that he's a forward ruck. So what I'm thinking will probably happen is at some stage during the year when we start doing our upgrades, I'll realise I really do want Grundy in here, or I really do want Marshall in here, and we can trade out a forward, bring Cameron down to the forward line, where if he can average around 100, he'd be a good contributor down here. He can be M5 or 6 or something, and I'll get another top end ruck. So we'll see how these plans come together. It doesn't always go as planned, very rarely in fact, but that's the thinking behind picking Darcy Cameron there. He was a great pick for Tim and Dan last year, and I never had him, so happy to get on board this year. And in the R3 position, a bit different to last year where we had 3 or 4 guys, the Hugh Dixons and Jack Hayes who played early. I'm not really hearing of any cheap ruckmen who are likely to get early games. So given that, I'm just going to go the cheapest guy I can find, 102k, who's a forward ruck as well, Nick Madden at the Giants. I think he's even injured as well, so can't see him playing, but that's fine because he'll just be a loophole, to use the vice captain loophole in the ruck's the easiest way to do that. And then later in the year, if I get Cameron into the forward line, keep him there, gives me that little bit of flexibility. If a Grundy or whoever it is gets injured, we can flick Cameron back up there as cover. So a few good reasons to pick Nick Madden, even though I don't think he'll ever play a game. Or better put him back in. And we go into the forward line, and this is going to be the easiest pick of the year. Josh Dunkley, who everyone will have, or they should have, because even if he does exactly what he did at the Bulldogs, he'll average 110, and he's going to the Lions, obviously, for a reason. They'll throw him straight into the midfield, and he'll be the number 2 banana there to Lachie Neale. I can't see him ever getting tagged because they'll tag Neale, if anybody. And he could average 120. Like, he had one year about 3 years ago where he averaged about 128 before getting injured in round 8 or 9 or something. So he has that scoring potential. He actually scored 200 in a game quite a few years ago. We know what he can do. Just absolute contested ball animal, tackles heaps, can get forward and kick a goal, take a mark as well. So absolutely. Like, we won't spend too much time talking about him because the next pick is tricky. There, in previous years, the last few years, this is where we've been able to pick one guy there, that we're confident can be a top scorer, and then really take some chances and pick a Jack Zeeble, pick a Stephen Coniglio, pick a Will Brodie, and all these guys to fill out our forward lines and save some money. But this year, there are 5 or 6 guys that, I would love to pick. They could score really well. Lots of mid forwards as well, which we like up here. So I did have in the team that went in the paper, Stephen Coniglio in this spot, and even though, again, similar to Sicily, not the same value, obviously, as last year, but I can't see him scoring any less. In the second half of last year, he averaged over 100, and, he's not going to get any less midfield time in the Giants now with Hopper and Taranto gone, you would have thought. So if he continues to play as a midfielder, we can pick him in the forward line. Could easily average 110. So, he's definitely right in consideration. But I have made one other sort of a late change in this position, and that is I've thrown Zach Butters in there. I picked Butters last year. A lot of us did, and he was very frustrating. Started the year with 2 really good scores over 100. Then he had a couple in the 50s. He got injured, or he was, I think, ill going into a game. He does sort of tend to find ways to get hurt, and odd things happen to him. But just the scoring potential is so good. And at this time of year, everything's upside. So, when you get to round 1, we can start hedging our bets a little bit more maybe. But at the moment, you just look at what someone could do. And, if everything goes right, he could average 120, which I think is probably higher than most of the other guys on this list. So that's why I put him in there. We'll play, 80% midfield, I would think. He was mostly midfield last year, but didn't really get things going for him till the last sort of 5 or 6 rounds of the year when he reeled off like 5 nearly 120 scores in a row to finish the year by the time everyone had traded him out. But if it goes well for him, could definitely see him scoring really well. Obviously, Port, you'd think would have a bit of a better year, win a few more games than they did last year as well. And then next to him, we've already mentioned him, Timmy Taranto from the Tigers. That sounds really good, and I'm happy to have him in KFC SuperCoach. Price a little bit under is what I think he can do, given he's played a bit all over the place at the Giants. They had so many midfielders, but again, as with Hopper, I think he'll play mostly as a centre bounce midfielder for Richmond, who can potentially push forward and kick a goal. But and that probably negates a little bit the one knock on him, which is his disposal. His kicking can be a bit questionable at times, but under Richmond's game style, really they're just getting the ball and banging it forward. Get a pack with Tommy Lynch or Jack Rewalt coming up over the top. So if he can get it to there, that counts as an effective kick. So hopefully that might help him a tiny bit. But he's just an elite athlete. He's killing it in all the time trials and all the preseason stuff. So I think he's a great pickup for the Tigers. They're both on 7-year deals. So Richmond obviously investing a lot in Taranto and Hopper, and that was watching the Tigers last year pretty closely, as I obviously did. That was their clear area of need, was clearances. They got smashed out of there a few times. We remember round 1 was the classic example against Carlton, went into the last quarter in front, and Carlton won 12 centre clearances in a row and, rolled over the top of them. So, that's really why they had to bring these guys in, to just try and even things up in the middle there and get the ball in the Tigers' front half, where we know they're really good at keeping it in there and just, hammering the scoreboard. So, we won't talk about Tigers for too long, but Taranto, I think he's going to have a really good year, and I think he'll be good value as a mid forward in KFC SuperCoach. Now at where are we up to? M4, got an F5. Now I'm seeing reports that he's just playing as a forward as in preseason. That worries me a bit, because he basically did that last year and averaged 63. But obviously he had some injuries. We know he's got injury history all over him, terrible injury history. I don't think he's ever played 22 games in his whole life. But this is Nat 5. He's also averaged 123 times. He's won 2 Brownlows. Like, he is a superstar. When he's going, he's a captain option in KFC SuperCoach. So to see him at 313K in the forward line, I can't not put him there, especially this early in the preseason. As things play out, we'll see whether he stays there. But as I said, if we're just looking at upside of this year, at this stage of the year, the upside is incredible for that price. He could, double in value. So, we're picking Nat 5. Let's just leave it at that, and we'll see how the preseason plays out. Obviously, we'll be keeping a very close eye on any little talk of injuries or anything like that. But I like having him there for now. Now, next to him, another really popular pick, I think, will be Toby McLean at the Bulldogs. Only 178,000 because he's barely played for 2 years, a couple of knee injuries in that time. But we saw he came back into the team last year for their final against the Dockers and scored 100, and that's what he's capable of. I think he had 9 tackles in that game. So he's a great tackler, can be used across half forward, basically in the Dunkley role, if Bevo wants to slot him straight in there. Now, I did see in their match simulation that he was in the B team. I think that was last week. So, we just watch and see what Bevo does. I mean, this is Bevo being Bevo. And the other great thing about, can you believe the Bulldogs? Every team this year plays one official practice match in the Amy series or whatever it's called now, and they get to play one other unofficial practice match. And every team is doing that except the Bulldogs and GWS. So we only get to see one game from the Dogs to see who gets into their team. Hopefully that team will reflect what their 22 will look like for round 1. But I think Toby McLean's definitely good enough to be in there. He was before he got injured. He had 1 year in SuperCoach where he was a great pick for us, averaged around 100 for half a year until we will trade him out. But I really like him. So hope he stays in and gets into the Dogs' best 22. Their 22 is going to be really tricky to pick, I think. So we'll see who ends up in there. And speaking of the Bulldogs and taking risks and what the hell Bevo is going to do, Josh Bruce is someone I don't think I've ever picked him KFC SuperCoach before, and I wouldn't even think about picking him as a full forward, but he's playing in defence in preseason. So that was obviously something the Bulldogs needed to improve last year. They were a bit leaky down there. To get someone down there who can potentially take some intercept marks, and that's how they're training with Josh Bruce in the preseason. So they've also got Liam Jones back, who will do sort of something similar. So, again, you just have to keep an eye on it. Is this how they're going to line up? But I think there could be a spot there for him. You think Alex Keith and Ryan Gardner are more sort of lockdown types, and even Liam Jones is a great spoiler of the ball. But Bruce could potentially take some marks. And we saw, with someone like Paddy McCartan, who, never been a great – oh, hang on, Lenny's going to have a contribution to the video here because someone next door is getting a delivery, which he loves. But we'll keep talking about Josh Bruce, who I think can score okay if he gets a role there in defence. Now, when I say score okay, I'm not expecting massive numbers, but, Paddy McCartan style, if he could score 60s, 70s, 80s, for at least 7 or 8 weeks and make some money, I'd be really happy with that. So he's there at the moment. Again, rookies, sort of placeholders. We'll see what plays out before round one. Ben King is another player, similar price, 170 odd K at Gold Coast, who I would definitely have as a backup option if no other rookies come through, because coming back from a knee, we know he's going to play. Scoring will be volatile as a key forward, but he only needs 1 or 2 really good games, and his price will shoot up. And he's never going to get subbed off, so he would be another safe option we could pick down there. But on my bench, I've got Fergus Green, who I really like. Again, we're talking placeholders at this stage of the year, but he's one I think could definitely survive there. Hawthorn picked him up from their VFL team, Box Hill, where he kicked about 80 goals in the last couple of years. He's 23, 24, and to me, he's the what do they say, like the LD Jack Gunston. So he just slots straight into that Jack Gunston spot, which obviously Hawthorn need to fill this year. So if he gets games in the preseason, I really like him as an option. And then we're starting to run out of money here. Look, I've got only 121K left, so we'll go for someone really cheap. And luckily, there is one, and that is Blake Drury, who his name jumped right off the page when I was reading about North Melbourne's Matt Sim, that he was a real standout. He was their first pick in the rookie draft, I think, this year, so he gets that 102K price tag. So and a mid forward as well, which would be handy. Always good to throw a few of those guys on the bench. Notice we've even got the defence mid here as well. So being able to throw those guys around is really useful. So we'll see. I mean, obviously rookie is very much up for grabs, but if Blake could get a game, that would be good. So attention, Clarko and the coaches down there at North Melbourne, give him a run for us. Thanks. So we'll save the team at February 1. 19K in the bank, so not heaps, but plenty of room to play around with if we could move one of these midfielders down to a Tom Green or someone, save some money there. There's plenty of different things we could do. So, and Dacos still question mark, but this is how the team is looking at February 1. So I'm liking it at the moment. It's giving me VC, Took and Captain Oliver in round 1. That seems like a pretty good setup. We'll have to look and see the order of the games. We'll worry about that as we get closer. But I did see someone on Twitter did some calculations. If you pick Rory Laird and Clayton Oliver in the same team, the order of the games is you could VC Oliver into Laird pretty much every week for the first 7 or 8 weeks. So that's another thing to consider with maybe throwing Rory Laird in there, but that would require finding a little bit of cash. So this is how we're looking at this stage. As I said, we'll try and get the other guys to show their early teams as well and a bit of the thinking that goes in behind it. So hopefully that's helpful. There'll be plenty more changes, I'm sure, as we roll through the preseason, and we'll be back to talk about those as we go. But leave a question or a comment below. See what you think of my team. Who have I missed? Who would you never pick in a million years? But we'll be back again with another one of these videos really soon.